Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Buckle Up, an ultra running conversation. As you can see, I'm flying solo today. At the last minute, Mandy sent me a message that she had a family emergency. I do want to give you an update that everything is okay and it all worked out at the end of the day. No harm, no foul, but we're glad everything worked out for Mandy. But she was unable to make the recording today with our guest. This past weekend was the Hard Rock and Western States lotteries. I was unsuccessful in Western States. I did not even have a Hard Rock qualifier this year, so no luck there because I wasn't even in. So onward and upward. I have some plans in the makings for 2026. Now that the lottery did come out, I'm just kind of finalizing it and making sure it all looks good on paper, but should be pretty exciting. And I'm really pumped for the 2026 season. Our guest today is Josh Coleman. Josh Coleman is fairly new to the ultra running scene. He ran 3 200s this past year in 2025 in the Triple Crown and completed them all in pretty impressive times, quite honestly. He did really well. He also just wrote a book that's recently out, Moving Forward, Running with Grief. It's a great story of triumph over tragedy. Josh is finding his way with the grieving process of losing his wife. It's a compelling story. I really think it'll resonate with anyone listening. Follow along to Josh's journey, and we'll catch up to you soon. Take care. Josh, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join us on the podcast. How's the weather in Phoenix, outside of the Phoenix area? Where are you at again?
It's great. Yeah, I'm just right out. I'm in Scottsdale. I'm near the McDowell Preserve, if you know where that's at. That's basically a couple miles down the road from where they do javelina and a bunch of the air vapor races. So, yeah, I've been out here for a couple weeks. I live out of my camper van, so I do a lot of dispersed camping, and then I do a lot of my work in my van. It's set up for that. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at today. And the weather, yeah, it's beautiful. I did a run this morning. I think this morning is around 40, 50 degrees, and I think it's already up to close to 60s or 70s. So, yeah, it's nice wintering in Arizona and training. So, this is my second winter out here.
All right, I got a bunch of questions. But first off, I love that area. McDowell Mountain Park, I've been there the last 3 years for our Vipa's Javelina 100. I will never race that race because I have too much fun being in costume and being a spectacle. And so you could go back to my Octobers for the past 3 years and see my costume set up. One year I was runner up in the costume contest as an FYI. So
awesome.
But I love that area. I'll be back actually on the other side of Phoenix for Across the Years in a few weeks. And I believe Mandy will be too. Her husband, Nick, will be running on The Last Man Standing. I'm going to do some volunteering and get some training runs in because I am buried in snow here in Western Colorado.
Yep. Yeah, I'm actually going to be Across the Years as well. So I'm going to be out there. I'm not running. I've got a couple friends that are going to be running it. Yeah, my race schedule is done for the year. I don't have any races until next year, so I'm just in training mode right now. But yeah, I love that area, and I'm with you on the javelina. I've been out there the last 2 years and paced, and I'm with you. I don't know that I may never run it either. Maybe I'll do the little fun, what is it, the Jackass one that's at night where you wear the costumes. A couple friends were talking about doing that, but I think other than that, it's a party. I'm just there, especially after I just got done doing Moab. I'm like, I'm here just to hang out and party and have a good time.
Yeah, it is a blast. I do get my run in, just to clarify, but I usually end up pacing somebody.
Yep.
But yeah, the Jackass night run mile one loop, it would be the perfect addition to the weekend. We volunteer. I did the live camp for the bike this year and last year, so I do loop one. I did the pro women this year for the live stream, the footage for.
You talking about Mountain Outpost?
Mountain Outpost. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. We got that settled. And I'll see you Across the Years, more than likely. I'll be volunteered from around the 30th through the 3rd. So I'm going to show up a little bit later. Yeah. And so I want to come for the New Year. I love running the route and doing the apple cider champagne toast and getting some training in. I'm prepared to volunteer for a few hours a day, as well as get my own runs in. I'll probably venture off into the mountains on some of the days, and some of the other days I'll run the bike path that runs right along next to the current venue. So I'm excited for that.
I'm going to basically do the same thing. just go and just have a good time, and then go off and do my training runs and stuff like that.
Awesome. It'd be great to catch up with you. Let's dive right into your history, though, with sport. I read a little bit about it, but you have a history with running. It's been in and out a little bit over the years, but otherwise, how did you get into the sport, and how did you find yourself in ultra running?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to love running around. I was definitely an outdoors kid, running around, playing tag, playing hide and go seek, all those things as we did as kids. At least, back in the, 80s, when I was growing up. And I think it was like in sixth grade, we had to run like a mile, and there was like a mile course. And when I was running that, I tied for first place with another kid. And I was like, okay, like maybe I'm kind of fast. I can do this. And I was never good at the short stuff. Like everybody did like the 40-hour dash. Like I was so slow out of the gates, but I could always do the enduring and outrun people. And then I got into like middle school, junior high, as we called it then, and did cross country and track and did the mile. And even then, like, and then, you kind of go from an elementary, and then it's like, at least in my town, it's like you had like 7 or 8 other elementary. So the competition got a little bigger, and I was kind of more mid pack, front of the pack. And so I did that up until, and then I think I did it my freshman and sophomore year of high school. And then just honestly kind of got burned out, the typical burnout student, and, wasn't a great student. And so really, once I got in my 20s, I'd play like a lot of basketball. I played tennis, did that kind of sports and things like that, but never did too much long distance running really until I got into my early 30s. It's when I ran like my first like half marathon, road marathon. At that time, I was living in the Kansas City area. So I did that. And then I think in like, I was probably 32, 33. I had a friend of mine say, hey, I'm going to run this marathon out in Lawrence, Kansas. You want to run it with me? And I'm like, sure, let's do it. Why not? And so I did it, and I think I finished in like 3 hours and 55 minutes, which I thought for my first one wasn't too bad. And I was able to get it finished. And then I think I tried to do the Kansas City Marathon that fall. That one was in April. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to qualify for Boston. Didn't have any training, like very good training. Didn't have a coach. Didn't even have like the smart watches back then. So I'm like mapping out, on, I think it was like Map My Run or one of those, trying to map out the course, and did it. And like, was doing really good up until like the half marathon. And then just like the wheels fell off. And I think I did a little faster. I think I was like at 3:47 or something like that. And then basically after that, I just kind of slowly did, some runs here and there. I was very on and off. And then when I got into my 40s, my wife and I at the time, we had moved to New York City, and, it was a very stressful job doing, marketing, digital marketing was like nonstop, and I needed an outlet. And so decided to join this run club actually in Harlem. And that kind of catapulted me. I was, just got me back out there outside. I kind of found my love for running again. There was like, it'd be a Monday night and there'd be 60, 70 of us running around the streets of Harlem. It was amazing in New York City. And this is back in like probably 2015, 2016. And so, yeah. And then my older brother, he ran the Kansas City Marathon, I think in like 2017, I believe it was, or 2018, and kind of inspired me. And I was like, all right, I'm going to try to qualify for Boston. I want to do this. And so I was like, okay, fastest marathon I can run to try to qualify. So I was like 41 at the time. And I was like, I think at that time I needed to run like a 3:20, and I found this New Jersey marathon, trained really hard. I mean, I was like, had a nice schedule of training, and hired a coach for a couple sessions, and I ended up running that and ran a 3:09. I was like, all right, like, okay, I still got some speed, and I qualified, and didn't get cut off. And so then I ran Boston that next year. And
What year was
then
that?
that was 2019 I ran it. So I ran 2018 were you
I was
there?
at Boston in 2019.
Paint, yeah. So that race didn't end up being a great race for me either. I ended up having this foot problem. I had this inflammation stuff going on my foot, and by like mile 15, mile 16, my foot felt like it was like on fire, and felt like I had needles running through it. So I'm like kind of walking through the aid stations. I think I still ended up finishing around 3:46, 3:47. I know a lot of people, oh, that's great. But when you have aspirations of running faster, it feels like a bad race. So I've always wanted to do that race again, and I'll get to that. So after that was like 2019. I think I took the rest of the kind of year off. Like my foot was inflamed, and just like, I'm just going to shut it down for most of the rest of the year. I might have picked up and started doing some light running. Well, then that pulled us into 2020. And so we were living in New York City, or actually New Jersey at that time. And this is when COVID happened. And so in New York, it got crazy. And so we were working from home, and anything I could do just to get outside. So I started really just getting into running and making it like an everyday thing. So that's when I think I really became an everyday runner. and take a day off here or there, but every day. And then yeah, so from there, we end up moving to Florida during that time during COVID, and then that led into doing some half marathons down there, doing some trainings, and ultimately didn't end up starting doing ultras until 2023. And so what led to that is, which we'll talk about in my book, is my wife passed away in 2022 from a car accident, June of 2022. And so after that, I still had the love for running, and it was basically became my outlet. So that following year, I had ran Miami Marathon, and I had a trail runner friend that I'd met in Florida, and we started running together, and he invited me to run some little trail race and did that. And then that just kind of led. And then I ended up doing my first ultra. I did Sweat, Swat, and Swear, which is in north of Tampa, Florida. It was a 50K, and that was my first ultra. And, but yeah, I think it was just, losing Aaron, just, the wilderness and the trails became my refuge and just my way of grieving and dealing with the grief. And happy to, answer any questions beyond that.
Gosh, Josh, that's such a tragedy, a loss, and it's got to be devastating. And it's obviously one of those sudden deals that you can't see coming, and it's just a horrible, horrible situation. And I'm sorry for your loss. If that's not obvious. Gosh, I couldn't even imagine in my own life. I try to put myself in other people's shoes sometimes and visualize that, and it's just challenging to consider at least.
Yeah, and I'll just add on top of that. Yeah, I mean it was the worst day of my life. June 11th was when the accident happened, and she didn't pass until June 16th, and yeah, the condolences and and I tell you, Brian, I don't want you to be in that position. I don't want anybody to have to, but it does happen, and you never think it's going to happen to you until it does. And then it was this obviously very surreal moment in my life, life changing. This was somebody I spent 20 years together with. She was my best friend. It's not just the spouse. She was my best friend. She's my bantering partner. She's my everything, and then that just gets taken away. You have to learn to, move forward with that and, carry that forward. And in those early days when it's raw and it's hard, and then it's extremely hard, but that's where running became my outlet, and then just challenging myself to go further and to keep moving forward further. And so that's how it just kind of started, and then it snowballed, and I'm happy to talk about where I've been since then.
I know you just shared your history with sport and running. Did Erin also share in the running as well? Did she enjoy running?
She hated running. To be blunt with it, but she loved to walk and be outside, so I always liked it. But what's interesting about us is we were definitely these opposites attract. So she was actually into musical theater, and I talk about this a lot in the book. That was her passion was theater. So we had these totally non-competing worlds, so she was a rock star on the stage, and and I'm trying to be a rock star on on the trails and on the road. And she was an amazing singer, an amazing performer, and she did a lot of community theater. She had a full-time job, but her hobby was theater, and she loved that. But we did a lot of walks together. She loved to walk, and she had some back problems too, which kind of restrained her from really to do any running. She had a herniated disc, which was really, really bad, and she had to have surgery for that. So it just, there was just some back problems that really, and she just didn't care for it, and that was okay, And so, but like I said, she always still liked to get outside and exercise. And when we moved to Florida, we got to walk every day and do that together, which was nice.
Josh, I don't want to get hung up on it, but how do you start with the grieving process after such a sudden and tragic loss?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. And I mean, those early days, it's so raw and it's so numb that you obviously you feel it, but it's just your world is just so flipped upside down that you don't know what's left and what's right. It's just you're just so numb. And I just remember those 4 or 5 days in the hospital, which ended up being a blessing. She didn't die on the scene. Obviously she never came to. So ultimately what happened is she had bleeding in her brainstem, and so that's irreparable. So we just had to take her off the breathing tube, and after 5 days, but we got to spend time with her. And I think that was the start of those. That was one of the first silver linings. And you have to start trying to find these things in life to just try to make sense of it. And why now? We just bought this new house. We'd only been in it for 6 months in Florida. Her job and career was going really well. Mine was going really, you're really at this pinnacle of your life, and you're why now? What is going on? And then you just have to come to the conclusion that, like, these things happen to people every day. There's the, whatever they say, the 30 to 40,000 fatalities, on the roads every year, I believe, just in the United States alone. And so I know this like phone call that I got has happened to somebody every day. And so I think about that a lot. And I know like I'm not alone, but in those early days you do feel alone, and the journey is hard. And again, you're just reeling, like, like I write in the book about how I'd wake up in the mornings and think like, oh, that was just a nightmare. And I would feel the other side of the bed and she wasn't there. And it's just gut wrenching, but it's like every day you just try to make progress, and you just take it. In those early days, it's like you're just take it back hour by hour, and then it becomes day by day. And, that stinging eventually starts to lessen, but there's days, even to this day, 3.5 years later, it still stings. It still hurts. But what I had to do is I had to start making a decision. Like, was I going to carry my life forward to honor her in the right way, and to know that, like, this accident, this car crash wasn't her fault. It wasn't my fault. And so you have to start trying to just make sense of it and just try to take the pieces and move them forward. And, and one of the things, and one of the reasons why I wrote the book is I wanted to carry her legacy with me and to keep her legacy alive. Cause she was 40 years old, and, it's like such a young life. And like you said, it happened so sudden, and it's just, and you just start trying to make sense of it. So I wanted to write it, for her, to keep her legacy alive, and just to keep, trying to understand and try to take grief as something and I realized early on too, that like grief was something that wasn't just going to go away. And I honestly believe to this day, it doesn't actually ever go away. What you do is you learn to live with it, and you learn to move forward with it, and you honor it, not as a heavy burden. It's not a heavy burden. I can laugh. I can have a good time. Like my life is not this woe is me. Like I've just had to learn to pick up the pieces and say, okay, what am I going to do with this? And first it was running. And then I wanted to take the story and to hopefully show other people, like, this is how grief can work in your life, that you can use it for good, and you can take the most tragic, the most worst day of your life and turn it into this, positive thing. And it's hard to think about that in the early moments. So if there's anybody listening to this podcast right now that maybe just lost somebody, or, recently, maybe in the last several months or even weeks or even the last year, like I understand where you're at. I understand those raw moments, and, but it takes time, and there's a day you're going to have to wake up and you're going to have to decide, I'm going to become a victor out of this. I'm not going to be a victim to this circumstance. It wasn't my fault. And even if it was your fault, or maybe you had something and maybe things didn't end well, like you can still pick up those pieces and use that for good, in my opinion.
That's a great message, Josh. I hope people really take that to heart. How long after this tragedy did it take for you to figure out that a book was a great outlet, a great resource?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. I think it was honestly, in the first couple of months. I knew I wasn't ready to write it right away, but I had an old colleague of mine that I worked with at a startup years ago, and he had started this company called Manuscripts to help authors self-publish. And so I called him. We had a call, I think maybe in the first 6 months, and we talked about it. And that's how, when I started talking to him about this whole idea about, you don't just move on from something like this. You don't just get over it, but you learn to move forward. And he started keying in on that. And that he actually helped me understand, or helped me come up with the moving forward part. And then I added the running with grief to add on to what helped me get through the grieving parts of it. But yeah, so I knew early on I wanted to write this book, but I knew like a year was going to be too soon, too raw. But I didn't want to wait like 5 years to write this book as well. But I knew early on I wanted to get this message out, that like there is a path here, and it's going to be different for everyone. People are going to read this book and they're going to resonate. But and one of the things I always tell people too, don't ever tell anybody how to grieve or how to, to get over it or move on. If you don't have anything to say, honestly, the best thing is to say nothing. And I always tell people when they ask me about how to deal with that, I was like, just show up. Just be there for them. Even as awkward and messy and weird as it might feel, and it's going to feel heavy, like you just being present is sometimes the best thing you can do for anybody that's going through a grieving time in their life, because a lot of times you're not necessarily looking for answers. You're not looking for it to be solved or something like that, because honestly, I don't think that it's not about getting solved. It's something you have to learn to live with, and you learn to live with that grief, but you use it as a power. And so I'm trying to use that as a message. I never thought in my young life that I would be this grief advocate, but I'm good with it. I'll wear that. I'll take that on. I'll take on that challenge. to move it forward, to help people understand, not try to tell them, but maybe show them how to grieve.
Yeah, all too often we see that. Even in myself, we try to fix the problem, right? We're gonna fix this problem, but this is a situation that's never gonna leave you. It's never gonna change or go away or be any better, right? We can help you deal with it as best as possible. Writing the book, was that a little bit of? I mean, is that part of the grief too, as well? Is that part of the grieving process? Is that helping you pave your way for working through the process itself?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've shared a few times in some posts and, things on Instagram that, first and foremost, I wrote this book for Erin, to honor her. But the second reason why I wrote it, it was to help me, to help me grieve. Cause, I don't necessarily count myself. It's funny, it's like, the guy I work with with manuscripts, he calls it being an author. And I kind of feel that way. I feel more of an author than a writer, but I was able to pull these thoughts together and get them out on paper and help me just through that and through some journaling and things like that to get these words on paper on how I felt and how I felt going through it. So yeah, that's kind of how, it definitely has been that. And then the third reason that I wanted to get out there is to obviously help and show other people, share my story. Again, not tell them how to grieve, but maybe show them how I grieved. And if that's a way to help them, in any capacity.
Yeah, what a great message. I can't wait to get my hands on the book, Moving Forward, Running with Grief. It's out in Amazon. Why don't you tell us where it's at,
Yeah,
Josh,
it's
while we're on the
currently
topic of it? Yeah.
absolutely. It's on Amazon. You can get it the Kindle version or the paperback, and I believe you can pick up the the hardcover as well. It's not on Audible yet. I should have that. I start recording that at the beginning of the year. That should be out hopefully by May or June. But now you can get the written paper copy or the Kindle version on Amazon.
Great. I'll be sure to check that out for sure. Gosh, what a wonderful story. I'm so excited for the book, but I do want to touch on the fact that you have excelled in the space of ultra running as well. You've really challenged yourself. What is it about ultra running where you're finding your stride? Like, what is it about ultra running that's helping you with this grieving process?
I think, one, it's just, being on the trails. There's just nothing like it. There's nothing like being in the mountains. And I realized, I love being in Florida, but once I came out west and did a couple of races, like my first ultra out west was I did the Bigfoot 40 miler back in the same year, 2023. And I think, just the challenge of the mountains and just pushing myself and see how far I could go. I think that's a lot of us. And it enabled me to just put it all out there and to go and see how far I could go. And then I think it becomes a little bit addicting where it's like, okay, how much further can I go? And I know with the Bigfoot, they also have the 200 miler. So it was like, I wonder maybe I could do that at some point. But I think even beyond just that running, I think it's the community, because as you know, you've got an aid station captain jacket on right now, like how long you spend with people. And I think it was just, it's not like a marathon or half marathon. And I love road running, but you only spend a couple hours maybe at those races, and maybe you have a run group and stuff like that. But like you spend days with these people and you spend miles with these friends and things like that I found over. And so that's definitely been the other side of this too. It's not just the running part, but just the community part and the fellowship. And now after 3 years, I have some of my best friends now that I've met because of trail running. And I think that community just brings so many people together. And when you start sharing your story, a lot of people start opening about stuff that they've gone through and trauma that they've gone through. And I've met a lot of friends too that maybe not lost somebody, but have gone through their own trauma, people with sobriety and things like that. And so, yeah, I think that's what just makes the community so unique. But yeah, I just love it. I love to push myself. And, I've been able to, win a few races here and there. And, at my age, I try to I think too, it's like, oh man, I'm almost 50 now. And it's like, and when I started, I was like 46 when I did my first ultra. And I was like, man, I feel like I have this window. I got to kind of push it. So I've been trying all these different distances. So it's like 40 milers, I've done 100K, I've done a couple 100 milers, and I've actually done now 3 200 milers. And so I've done more of those than hundreds. And I don't know. I like that distance. It's intriguing. It's the challenge of, being sleep deprived and hungry and trying to balance the food and the nutrition, which I've had a lot of issues with that we can talk about. But yeah, I just love it. I love the challenge, and I'm ready for 2026. So it's going to be another fun year of trail running.
What 200s have you done?
Yeah, so I did the Triple Crown. So I did the Tahoe 200, the Bigfoot 200, and then I finished off at the Moab 240. Also did the Black Canyon 100K this year. That was actually my first 100K. didn't actually have a great race. I found out that after about 50 miles, I've started to have some nutrition and hydration problems, and so I've had to try to work on that. And each of those long races over 50 miles, I have vomited and thrown up and gotten really sick. I got extremely sick at Bigfoot. I actually spent 9.5 hours at an aid station. That is no joke, to sleep and to sleep it off. Luckily, I was far enough ahead. I didn't get cut off, and then actually spent another 4.5 hours at another aid station. And I think I was close to 2 or 3 hours from being cut off, but was able to finally push through it and get it finished. But that's the other side of it. It's just that attrition. And that's what's cool about 200s is like you actually have time. I mean, unless you're fighting the back of the pack, it's like you have a lot of grace. The cutoffs are pretty generous. And so I think that's why, I tell people, like, don't, if you get sick or something, like, don't just quit unless you're fighting, obviously, the cutoffs. But if you have time to rest and sleep it off, like, it makes such a difference. And I was able to do that and, get them finished. But yeah, those are the 3 that I did this year.
Well, that's impressive. I didn't realize it was a full Triple Crown in the same year. I thought they were broken up over from 23 till currently.
Yeah, I feel like
But
I'm just
that's
still new at
super
this.
impressive.
It's like, yeah, just getting started like 3 years ago. And it's like, I feel like I'm trying to make up for lost time. Like, I should have done this years ago, but not really. They happen when they happen, and I'm happy to be where I'm at in my career. And yeah, they've been a blessing. And who knows, like, to be honest with you, with Aaron's passing, like, I don't know if I would have gotten into this. I might have just stayed with road running and doing marathons and things like that. But I always thought I would eventually get into trail running. Never ultras. I never would have thought in my when I first heard about ultras, I think it was my brother-in-law was telling me about some lady he worked with where he was working out at the time and talk about toenails falling off and things like that. I'm like, man, why would anybody ever do that? And here I am.
How many toenails do you have, Josh?
I had 2 fall off over these last 2 weeks, still from Moab. So, but they're all back on and growing back. So, but yeah, my big toe and the one next to it get hammered pretty hard.
Well, I'm right there with you. Yeah, the Triple Crown has been on my radar for quite some time. I just have not been able to piece it together. This coming year, on 26 for myself, I'll be at Tahoe 200, and I've done Moab on 2 different occasions in the past. So I'm
Nice.
familiar with them. I haven't dabbled off to Bigfoot just yet, but it's obviously on the radar. So yeah, what is your advice for somebody dabbling in the 200s or even just considering it as an option? So maybe they've progressed all the way to the 100K or 100 miler, and now we know it's the next logical progression.
Yeah, it seems that way. I say go for it. They're different. And you talk to some people, and some people say the 200s are actually easier than the 100s just because of the time. The more time you have, it's just then you're going to fight the sleep stuff. But, there's people that literally hike pretty much the whole thing. So it's not, it's called a race. Honestly, it's not actually called a run. So you can think about it like you're hiking for 3 or 4 days. Yeah, it's hard. But as you've worked aid stations, just all the food that's there, all the nutrition and things like that. And so that's why I like it. And again, goes back to community, but I say go for it. If you want my opinion, I say go for it. Sign up for all of them. But I would say, like, if you're looking for one that's, like Bigfoot's pretty challenging. There's a lot more elevation climbing, things like that. I would say out of the 3 that I did, I mean, Tahoe is probably going to be your easiest one. It's a lot of the same terrain, but there's still a lot of climbing. Don't get me wrong. And it definitely is challenging. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it may be the easier of the 3. I would say Moab's probably the most challenging just because you do all the different terrains. You're in the desert, you're on the rocks, you're up in the mountains. This year was crazy because we're dealing with, tons of rain. And yeah, it was wild. I was running with somebody this morning. I said, I'm still trying to get my mind wrapped around that race. I don't know what I just did. It was wild out there. But those, there's Cocodona, there's some other ones. Mammoth is a new one that's new. I don't know when they're going to have signs for that. I think they're coming up. It's a lot of runnable road. It's, as far as like fast, it's one of the faster ones. I think the top time got done in 45 hours, 46 hours, which
Oof.
yes, it's still crazy fast, but it's still very, very doable. Yeah. I recommend recommendations. Go for it. Let's go.
All right, that sounds awesome. Josh, what do you got planned coming up? Sounds like you get a big year, even to challenge yourself even more in 26. And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's go bigger for me. So I will start off the year. I will do the Black Canyon 50K, just kind of a warm up race. I guess you can say now. I did the 100K. I want a little bit of redemption. I'm not gonna do the 100K again, just with training. And then I'm actually gonna squeeze out and do the Boston Marathon. I actually ran the Chicago Marathon last year. It's always been on my bucket list. Well, I've already done it, but I always want to go back because I had a foot injury when I did that race and just always want to go back and do it. So I'll squeeze out and do that. And then I'm on the wait list for Cocodona. Hopefully I'll get off that. I think I'm 74th on the list right now. I'm hoping I get in. So, and then I'm planning on doing the Triple Crown again. I'm already signed up for Tahoe and Bigfoot again. I just want to do them again. I know I can do better in at least Tahoe and Bigfoot, just because of the challenges. If I can fix some of those nutrition problems that I had in both of those, and then Tahoe, you've ran that one before, been out there. I got what they call the Tahoe long, where you get the congestion. And then I'm looking at one or two other ones. I'm potentially looking at doing Mammoth when signups, and then Mike McKnight and Ben Light are starting a new 200 in Utah, and I don't remember the name of it. Maybe you know the name of it. I just know it's going to be in late August. So I'm looking at those, maybe both of them. I don't know. I may get crazy here and do 5 or 6. I had a good friend of mine, Adam and Andrea. They've done like 9 or 10 this year. So I'm like, I don't know. They become addicting. They're if you have the time and resources to do them. I know not everybody has that ability to do that, but yeah. So those will be the races that I plan on doing. And yeah, so those 4 or 5, and then like I said, Boston, and then Black Canyon.
Josh, it seems like you are really thriving and enjoying the 200 scenario more than the 100. And maybe that's just an observation from your 2026 schedule. Is that true? And do you have a reason why?
Yeah, I think again it just goes back to it's just they're intriguing, and I had some issues in both of them. 2 of the 3. I mean, you have problems in all of them, but just, nutrition issues in the first 2. And I just feel like that challenge is like, I want to keep trying to solve that and get better at them. And just, yeah, I think it's just being out there for 4 or 5 days. I love it. I think it's still, maybe it's part of my grieving journey that I want to just be out there. I want to be around the people, and sure, I could sign up for some hundreds and do some there's obviously tons of those, but this one, for whatever reason, Brian, it's the intriguing one in my life right now, and I want to keep doing them and do more of them. And then maybe, who knows, maybe in 27, I'll, scale it back down and do some more hundreds. And because, yeah, I don't know, sometimes the hundreds are harder just because the cutoffs, I did Leadville, I ended up having to DNF that one because I fell and hurt myself. I did that last year and hurt my hip. And so I had to stop at the turnaround at Winfield. So I got to see the whole course, but didn't go back and get my buckle. And then I did Bighorn 100 was my first 100. Yeah, I did that one in like, I think just under 27 hours. But yeah, it was tough, and those cutoffs are tough. And, but yeah, they're all challenging, but I think that's just where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I could totally appreciate the pieces of the puzzle, and maybe you're trying to get them to fit a little bit better. You got them to fit. Obviously, you got to the finish line of the Triple Crown, but maybe you're trying to maximize the learning experience and make those puzzle pieces fit a little tighter.
Yeah, definitely.
Josh, I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate you stepping out onto the show and telling us all about your journey. Gosh, I can't wait to get my hands on this book. Truth be told, before the recording, we've already discussed that I'm kind of an audio guy, so I might wait until the June if I can, but I might just pick up the book on Amazon and start skimming it. Once I get into the first few chapters, then I can usually race right through it. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's I think it's only 108. It's not a super long book. I think it's 188 pages or something like that, and I think it's pretty fast and pretty readable. Yeah, no problem. I'm similar in that I do a lot more audible books than I do reading books, and it's one of those things where it's like, I could have waited, but it's like I wanted to start getting this message out. And I know a lot of people like to read the paper, versions, and like to actually have books in their hands. And some love their Kindle and are on their phone and just read it from their phone. So everybody's got their own style. But yeah, hopefully that book, the audio version, will be out by May of this next year.
Yeah, there's so much truth in meeting the reader, the listener, where they're at, right? And having all the platforms out there. It's the same with this podcast. We have it on 4 or 5 different channels because people absorb the content different ways. So I totally appreciate that. Where can our listeners catch up to you at, Josh? Where can we follow along at?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way is probably my Instagram. It's just Josh Run Adventures. That's where I post most of my stuff. I think I've got a Facebook page as well, but that's where I post most of my content. If you get to that page, then I've got a link tree that links to the books. You can even, if you're not an Amazon person, there's actually a link in there too for Ingram Sparks, where you can order it through like Barnes and Noble and places like that as well. So I should have brought that up as well. So if you're, Amazon's probably the quickest, but if you're like, I don't want to use Amazon, or I'm not an Amazon person, that's the other way to get it. Eventually I'm going to try to get it in bookstores and physical copies in bookstores, but that's a whole nother process to go through. But yeah, Josh Run Adventures is the best place to catch up with me at.
Great. I'll link your link tree into the show notes. And gosh, we are rooting for you, Josh. And I'll see you here in a few weeks at Across the Years for sure.
Sounds great, Brian. Thank you for the time.